in warehousing industry. May I now May I now welcome the keynote address of the day, Mr. Anshul Singhal, Managing Director, Wellspin One. Anshul has over 15 years of leadership experience in the infrastructure and real estate sector, with a track record of establishing 5 new businesses from the ground up for 3 large corporates. He has held CEO and director positions for Blackstone, Warburg Pincus, and Brookfield investee companies. He enjoys a strong network of relationships across PE funds, business houses, family offices, and customers. He is a member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors (RICS), GRI Club, and has a unique distinction of being one of the only Indians selected for an internship that involved working with the White House, Pentagon, IMF, and World Bank during the George W. Bush administration while at university. Over to you, Mr. Singhal.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction. I hope you guys can hear me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's always good to be back in, SSMB forum. It's a very nostalgic feeling to be back to your roots. I started my career with steel structures, trying to sell steel buildings in India was a very uphill task. About 13 years ago is when JSW Severfield started, and I was 24 at the time, trying to partner with Severfield, build that business out, and convince buyers that please buy steel because steel is faster, it's lighter, it requires less people, it's more environment friendly, all of that. So I could say that at 3 a.m, if you woke me up, I could tell you why steel is better. I can still do that. And even now, it naturally comes to me, to try and use steel first, because I understand the benefits so well, because I was trying to sell it so hard. So it's always good to be back. So thank you for having me, Avneet, in this forum. I really appreciate it. Just to kind of not take up too much time and finish this in about 5-7 minutes and share my thoughts with you. The topic that we're here to discuss is sustainable design in the warehousing industry today. Now, I've been in this field for about 6 years. We've developed close to 6 million square feet of warehousing for everybody from Amazon to you name the customers, and we've managed to do that. And over this time, what we've realized is, if you just map the warehousing sector as a whole, right? Today, just grade A plus grade B warehousing as a business, as a sector, is about 200 million square feet of space, which is currently the stock of the country, right? Which is basically 210 million square feet is already in place, already executed, and already occupied by various customers like Amazon, Flipkart, DHL, DB Schenker, Kuehne Nagel, big balance sheet guys, right? Now, I was just doing some rough math before joining the call with the best of my technical knowledge, and I'm not an engineer. So I think if you take a simple calculation of 32 kilograms a square meter, or 3.2 kgs, you reach, and if you divide that by, and then if you add another 0.6 for the foundations, etc., for about 200 million square feet, you reach about 800,000 tons of steel that's been consumed in the warehousing space as a whole. And I'm talking about prefabricated structural steel. I'm not talking about steel production, right? So about 800,000 tons has already been consumed. Over the next 10 years, we see that this sector is going to grow at a bare minimum of 25% CAGR is the growth expected out of this sector. Even if you discount it to 20%, in the next 10 years, you're going to reach 1 billion square feet of space, right? So the minute you reach 1 billion square feet of space, you're now, if you just do that same math, I think the number I came to was that you would consume about 4 million tons of fabricated structural steel, right? Only in the grade A, grade B space. Now, if you add EXIM warehousing, if you add inland container depots, you add FTWZ, and you had agro warehousing, you're probably going to at least double it. So you're going to reach about 8 million square feet of space. Now, if you put 4 and 4, 8 together, that pretty much is the current existing capacity for the pre-engineered building space in India today, right? So today, all the PEB top guys, unorganized, organized, put together, is about 8 lakh square feet per annum of fabricated steel capacity, right? If you multiply that into 10, it comes to about 8 million square feet of fabricated steel capacity. Let's assume that the sector will grow at a 10-12% CAGR. I know for a fact that most of the big guys are not adding capacities today because there is already underutilization of structural steel fabrication. But let's assume a 10% growth because the country is growing. So you will be at 12 million, 13 million, 14 million. At a worst case sector, the warehousing and storage business alone will consume, has the potential to consume 60 to 80% of the pre-engineered building manufacturing supply that is going to come up in the country. These are pretty big, powerful numbers. I hope my math is right, but this is just 40,000 feet high level math that we did. Obviously, there's timing impacts, and the growth has to happen, and there's all of those things that have to come in play for these numbers to make sense. But the larger point here is steel is a very big component in the warehousing industry. So all of our sites, so our first project in Bhiwandi, which is 110 acres, 60% of the material. So if you're buying 10 items to make a project, 6 are steel. So 60% of the material is steel, right? So warehousing is a big space that will consume a lot of steel going forward. We are one player in this space. There are others, right? There's about 800, 900 million square feet of supply coming up over the next 10, 12 years. These are very big numbers. The steel lobby, the structural steel fabrication lobby, my peers such as Kirby, Zamil, Tiger, BlueScope, whoever is, very, very serious about growing their market share, have to think very differently to service this sector. It is a very, very cost conscious business because we are not self-consumers as developers. We are building it for customers, right? So for us, literally all of the money goes into like a fixed deposit box, which is in the building. So we invest 100% capital upfront, and then the only returns is from rental income of that box, right? There's no liquidation or sale event happening, unlike a residential business. So the way the vendors and the contractors and the partners have to think about this is very differently than they would think for like a manufacturing customer. Because for a manufacturing customer, if 100 rupees is cost, the steel building cost out of that is probably 7-8 rupees, right? His majority cost is his equipment, his machinery, his craneage, his power, his labor. But for us, this is the majority of the cost. And it's a big space. You can't ignore it now, right? Because it's just going to be taking over, as I just explained the numbers before. So that's just a bit of a precursor on what warehousing as a space entails and how steel and structural steel fabrication will play a very important role in it. I think both need each other, but just a message that the community needs to think about it a little differently. If you kind of come to sustainable design, which is our main topic, so what is sustainable design? If you just have to, in a layman's terms, again, I'm not an architect or an engineer or claim to be an expert in sustainable design, but if you use, while building it and while operating it, if you use less of the planet's resources, that's sustainability in my mind, right? And the third most important thing is if you can recycle it. So 3 things, right? Well, when you build it, during the process of building it, you use as little of the planet's resources as possible. During the process of running or operating that kit, machinery, or project, you do the same. You use as little of the planet's resources as possible. And the third is post the life of that particular project or asset, or in between that life, you are able to recycle that particular product. So that's sustainability in a nutshell, in a layman's simple language. If you then add that to how we use it in warehousing. So steel is already, I mean, everybody here is a much better expert than I am on steel. Steel is already one of the most sustainable building materials there is, and there will be. And there's no doubt about that, right? So the way steel is produced we have some fantastic manufacturers in our country, top end, global guys like JSW, Tata, SAIL. These are good, solid companies with very, very good norms in how they procure, how they produce their processes, zero effluent discharge. and various things. Our per capita steel consumption is going up as a country. We are a major steel supplier. So the way we are already producing steel is very, very sustainable, right? So just by choosing that as a material of choice in warehousing business, right, you're making the design more sustainable, number one, right? Number two, uh, as I said, 60% of our total project material items is steel, right? So that if you add that sustainable steel as a product, it goes. So that's just material choice. Now, if you start looking at generally 40% of the steel that we consume as a country, right, is produced locally, right? Versus certain items that you may have to import more. Now, the minute you're importing less, you're using less fuel, less haulage, again, using up less of the planet's resources to build it. So that becomes very sustainable. The other thing we're able to easily integrate with the steel design in our warehousing parks is we're able to, on our steel roofs, we are able to put solar panels. So what that does is it provides, we're able to use the energy of the sun to power up the buildings post a certain time during the daylight operations, which is pretty significant in warehousing. So most warehousing operations start very early in the morning, pretty much at dawn, and they go on till various hours at night. So warehouse pretty much operates 24 hours, especially the new big warehouses of Flipkart, Amazon, Mintra. These are not warehouses anymore, right? So they're no longer go downs where you just store stuff. These are pretty much factories now, right? So they have everything going on in them, from conveyor belts to little robots running around to MHE. You have a lot of storing, picking, packing, unpacking, processing, labeling, marking, right? You have quality checks. So if you see what is Amazon fulfilled, when you order something, that means something at the back end, right? And all of those processes happen in a warehouse. So all these daylight operations in a steel building, because you have these brilliant 3 to 4% skylights, right? You're able, and both again at the roof and at the periphery of the building, you're able to kind of save a lot of energy costs there. We're already designing all our parks to be IGBC gold rated at a bare minimum. So that goes without saying. Uh, the fact that in the middle of, now these assets typically last for 25 to 50 years, right? Now markets changing, dynamics keep changing. In the middle, if you want to make modification to a steel building, a warehouse building, it can be done, right? But can you do that so easily with alternate materials? I don't want to use the word concrete, but can you do it with the alternate materials? Probably not so easily. So the minimal damage you have to make, the minimum rework you have to make, again, you're using less of the planet's resources, making it a more sustainable design. uh, so these are some of the points that I can think of talking about sustainability in design and steel. We're already doing most of them or all of them in our warehousing parks. We're coming up with about parks in 7 to 8 cities over the next few years. Our first park is in Bhiwandi in Mumbai, which is spread over 110 acres of land. It is the largest single location compliant development in Mumbai that will be coming up till date. It's a 1,000 crore project. We will be building about 2.7 million square feet of space there, which and we are currently talking to a lot of the PB guys and negotiating hard to try and get good rates there. So we hope we'll close something soon. And that's pretty much it from my side. So just to sum up, what I just spoke about, we have the warehousing space, which is currently at 200 million square feet, going to roughly a billion in about 8 years, which means it's going to consume about, and then if you add, non-grade A warehousing, which is EXIM and the other types, you're going to end up consuming about 6 to 8 million square feet, 6 to 8 million tons of fabricated steel, which should form anywhere between 60 to 80% of the fabricated steel capacity over the next 10 years, which are pretty big numbers. These are, and again, these are my calculator math, right? So excuse me if the numbers are not correct. I'm not quoting any source. And the next thing is that sustainability has to be a core. Just by choosing steel, we are becoming sustainable, but there's a lot more that can be done as a responsible developer. How you treat your rainwater harvesting. So for example, we're doing that. We're adding roofs on the panels, solar panels on the roofs. We are doing a lot more in terms of our design. And I can go on with the list of stuff, but I don't want to take up everybody's time. Where you, with the use of steel as a material, the integration of sustainability becomes much easier and much more cost effective to do in the long run, right? So that's my small take on the warehousing space and sustainability as a design. I hope that was useful. Thank you very much for having me again, Abneet, and everybody
Thanks,
else.
Anshu.
We can carry on with the seminar now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singhal, for those knowledgeable insights and setting the tone and for the event. May I now introduce you to the moderator and the esteemed panel aboard. Mr. Ruchir Panwar, Director Technical KKD Studio. Mr. Ruchi has international professional experience in design and planning of hotels, software technology facilities, airports, healthcare facilities, signature buildings, and sports facilities. He has also been the group head of the designs of super specialty, multi specialty hospitals, integrated healthcare complexes, medicities, airline hangars, MRO facilities, cargo terminals, and air traffic control facilities, software technology facilities, cricket and sports stadiums, SEZs, and industrial parks. Up next, Mr. Makrant Dikshit, National Head Projects Wellspin 1. Mr. Makrant Dikshit has 17 years of strong track record setting up greenfield mega projects and project management of large strategic construction projects across manufacturing, automobile, and rail locomotive industries. He is exposed to design, bid, build, as well as EPC projects, covering planning, design development, and executing construction projects involving method engineering, development, contract administration, resource planning, in compliance to quality standards. Up next, Mr. Pallav Srivastava, Director Projects and Development, Indospace Development Management Private Limited. Mr. Pallav is an accredited project management professional from Project Management Institute holding a postgraduate diploma in advanced construction management and a Bachelor of Engineering degree. He has built expertise in project management, project proposals, contract administrations, systems implementation, sustainability features, business processes re-engineering, and project controls with over 22 years of extensive and diverse experience in both domestic and international markets. He heads the Indospace Corporate Affairs Division and is an advisor to the Indospace Environmental and Social Governance Committee. Up next, Mr. Rahul Agarwal, Managing Director, Coolex Cold Chain Limited. With a diploma in business management from Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, Pune, Mr. Rahul currently is the Managing Director of Coolex Cold Chain Limited, along with his brother, Mr. Kunal Agarwal, who is an MBA from USA. The organization is heading for a big jump in the field of pharma cold chain services. Under his leadership, Coolex is a proud recipient of multiple awards and is a co-organizer and speaker at the most pharma cold chain conferences, government initiatives, and at management institutes. Up next is Mr. S. Krishna Kumar, CEO Building Solutions Everest Industries Limited. Mr. Krishna Kumar is the CEO of Everest Industries Limited. He has a rich experience in diverse roles including engineering, sales and marketing, project and site management, manufacturing, and operations. He has pursued mechanical engineering from Sardar Patel College of Engineering and holds a degree in business management from SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai. Up next is Mr. Arif Siddiqui, founder and CEO, Koigin Consultants. Mr. Arif has overall 33 years in-depth hands-on experience in sales, warehouse operations, and management and business management. He is the founder of Koigin Consulting, a leading intra-warehouse layout design company, which includes man, material, and machine process flow and automation design. He is also a member of Planning Commission, Logistics Sector, Council of SCM Professionals, National Disaster Management Authority of India, and many more. Up next, Mr. Sadashiv G. Chakravarti, Associate Director, RSP Design Consultants, India Private Limited. Mr. Sadashiv G. Chakravarti has over 12 years of experience in master planning and architectural developments. Prior to joining RSP Design Consultants, he was associated as an architect from 2008 to 2010 with SB Designs, Sydney, Australia, a multidisciplinary firm that offers architecture planning, interior design, and project management services in Sydney, Australia. He joined RSP India in 2010 and has since been involved in the design and development of several architectural design and master planning projects. Up next is Mr. Rashid Domadia, General Manager Projects, KSH Infra. Mr. Rashid holds a diploma in civil engineering and has 20 years of experience in the real estate and construction industry. He is currently working as a General Manager Projects at KSH Infra. Requesting all the attendees to please participate in the poll and write the name of the panel whom you would like to address the question to during the Q&A session. Also, do glance through our latest interactive issue of SSMB magazine. The issue takes you through the cover story, which is a majestic structure that depicts the creativity of our Indian team. So do have a look. The link to which will be available in the chat box. Over to you, Mr. Parwar.
Thank you, Andrea. Welcome everybody, all esteemed panelists and colleagues, all the people who are participating and watching the webinar. And a big thank you to Anshul, who I think has just left, who actually set the stage for everything. And he's kind of outlined the total scope and potential of warehousing, which has been hitherto not looked at in an organized manner. So we are here, gentlemen, to hear your thoughts, because all of you have been involved with warehousing for a number of years, and you've been facing a whole lot of challenges, and you have brought in a lot of innovation to the field. So we will take up all the discussions now relevant to a few questions that I had put together. What we will start with, of course, is related to the topic, which is we are talking about new age sustainable design versus standardized design and warehousing. However, what my personal opinion has been is that while we are talking about sustainability, and it's a good thing and we are bringing it in, the standardization aspect of warehousing has always been left behind and it's been unaddressed. So with that in the background, it's not so much as a versus, it is more to do with how do we address both. We, I think, need to have standardization, and we need to move forward and get all our standardized design warehouses to be done so in a sustainable manner. So then sustainability kind of gets added on to the design standards of existing warehouses, or even the ones which are currently being designed. So what I just wanted is opinions, and the questions are open to all. We would start off with the first question, which is that what, in your opinion, is the adequacy and quality of the warehousing infrastructure? We all know that there have been quite a bit of warehousing been done, and the big word that always comes up in everyone's mind is the Bhivandi warehouse. It's become literally another standard. So we all know about those. Wanted to get your opinion on warehousing and logistics sector. So it could cover a gamut of different types of warehousing, including cold chain facilities, including bulk goods facilities, what have you. So whichever background or experience you have, you could share with us. Arif, I think you should take the lead on this, because you have been in the industry for a long time. Arif, you're muted. Unmute you. Ha.
Thank you very much, and sorry for being on mute. Thanks to everybody, and also the organizers for having invited me to this very, very prestigious session. I think the background is quite well set for a very meaningful and interesting discussion. I can see that we have an extremely strong panel out here, and we'll be able to, I think everybody will be able to create huge value. However, my response to your question, is with the perspective of that our company that provides these services for functional and master planning and architectural detailing, also from the perspective of designing of warehouse buildings and logistics parks and intra-warehouse layouts, etc. It is very, very critical that for us to first of all understand that these are functional buildings that we are talking about. We are not talking about architectural marvels. We are not talking about stuff which will be looked from outside and praised by people who don't even understand what the functionality of these buildings are. So these are highly functional buildings. They need to be designed with huge focus, where the customer remains at the center. And when I say the customer, I'm talking about the operator, the user, the tenant in very big terms, the occupier who's going to be using these facilities, and therefore it needs to fit the purpose. The main focus, coming to the adequacy, I think as far as adequacy is concerned on the quantity front, Anshul has very clearly outlined the supply and the gap in supply, or the prospective demand that's going to be in terms of millions of square feet. And I'm very happy to hear that he's actually talking about 60% of the total steel that probably is going to be manufactured will be consumed in this particular industry sector, if I heard him right, which in any case is very clear that quality warehouse, and I wouldn't go by gradation, as you know, of A, B, and C, but I'm saying quality warehouses that conform to the requirement of the occupier. And that's the definition of quality. Quality warehouse, there's a huge gap, and that gap is going to continue for a very long time, and it's going to stay for a very long time. Because the demand is coming up from shifting demand from warehouses which have either got dilapidated or which have moved. Well, earlier they were industrial zones, and now they've gone into, I would say, residential zones, and therefore you need to change the use of that particular land, and therefore get into. So there's a shift-based demand. There's also a non-conformance-based demand that is coming up because of various audit regulations, compliance issues, etc. And organizations and companies, the warehouses are no more compliant, so to say, and therefore there's a huge demand that is coming up. The issue of demand, I think, has always been there for the past 10, 15 years, and that's why you see so much of private equity infusion. So I don't think that there's a need to even brain on the fact that is there a demand or not a demand. In terms of adequacy of supply, I think we have severely shortage of quality warehouses. But what we need to focus on is that, are the designs adequate? The current infrastructure that is coming up, is it adequate? The total size of the business that it is, or the total requirement of warehouse, against that, not more than 10 or 15% of warehouses to total square feet of space is actually quality infrastructure. We still have in India 85 to 90% of the current warehouses, so-called godowns or distribution centers, fulfillment centers, which are inadequate in terms of the functionality. They are not adequate in terms of what the fit for purpose is. They're not designed to improve the velocity. They may be designed to improve speed, but they're not designed to improve velocity. These designs that they're made on are not married to the function. So they are designed independently. They're very centric to a developer and not centric to the user. So they're great as far as ground occupation is concerned, FAR and FSI is concerned, which leads to narrow roads, etc., and huge ground coverage, which is pro-developer, but they are not pro-users, most of them. I mean, I would bar a few, please. We can't, the exception is not a majority at this moment, so therefore, let's not talk about exceptions. The majority is what we are talking about. I don't want to keep giving this disclaimer every time, but yes, I mean, I know most of the people out here are from much organized developers and do not come in that category, but the majority in the market out there is still non-compliant. The other point is that, the designs, in my opinion, where we see inadequacy in design is that these designs are currently escalating the cost of the buildings, which are disproportionate to the functional value addition that they provide to the occupier. So we are finding buildings which are of 12 meters, 15 meters, and then we have this very, very funny vital statistics in India. And I don't know what, the last time I heard chest size, waist size, and hip size, was when we used to talk about what clothes were worn. But now here also in this industry, you find 36, 32, 36. I don't know what the shit it means, but these are the nomenclatures which are very loosely being used. Grade A, grade B, FM2 floor, jumbo warehouse, tiny warehouse, I mean, it gives us the jitters. So what I'm trying to say is that you're right. Standardization is something which is still very, very far. And organizations in the developed side, I think, and the companies that are listed here in this forum, and many of them who are not here, should actually put their brains together to see how can we standardize these industry specifications, because these are not your USPs. The USP is in the functionality of the building and not in the broader design of the building per se. It's in the
Sure. So what you've touched on is basically the program, the design program of all the warehousing. That's where most of it is lacking. Yeah. And therefore the response to the design program itself is not adequate. And therefore you have a whole lot of stuff which is being loosely termed as various kind of solutions. And there is a whole local terminology which has been added. I'd like to get Makaran's input on this, and anybody else who would like to add is also welcome. But I would start first with Makaran. What do you feel, Makaran, with regards to this?
Yeah, Ruchis. So my viewpoint here is that, like, as Arif mentioned, is that saying that we have to move from a definition of a go down to a kind of high level quality infrastructure. As you rightly pointed out, the kind of the warehousing is an integral and important part of the overall supply chain, right? And when we are saying that, are we doing something which is customer centric? I would call it from 4-point strategy. One is the basis the logistics plan. The logistics plays a huge important factor in terms of designing of any warehouse, right? So are we planning the kind of right traffic movement? So there are studies related to the traffic flows, traffic movement coming to the warehouses. Is the infrastructure being made available for suitable of a particular logistic warehousing park? So that's something which is part A. Part B, are we taking care of safety? Safety in terms of the users which are going to occupy, safety in terms of, let's say, the COVID pandemic has taught us so many relevant things. So while the designing is taking place, are we taking care of enough safety precautions that are embedded into the design itself, related to the hygiene, related to entrance, all that aspect that needs to be taken care. Safety is also related to the compliance part. So is the park or those warehouses are fully compliant to the codal provisions, be it from a design standards or be it from a legal compliance standpoint. Third point comes to my mind is in terms of efficiency. If you are planning something from a customer-centric operations, the kind of logistic park warehouses have to be efficient in terms of the traffic operations, efficient in terms of the space that we are trying to utilize into it, efficient power uses, as Anshul mentioned in his opening speech. Are we utilizing right level of resources? Are we enhancing the natural resources available to us? Are we considering the environment, which is the topic kind of underlying discussion of the day? Are we taking care of the environment aspect in terms of the sustainability design? There are standards related to the green warehousing standards. I think it's a welcoming move from IGBC that they have introduced a specific new standard related to the warehousing industry in India, right? So that was the point 3. Point 4 is in terms of the smart operations. Gone are the days where the warehouse is to be only looked as a go down to store something. Today's warehouses are really technologically enabled. There are large multinational players and large volumes of inventory that's lying around them. So it's all is tech enabled, use of artificial intelligence and things like that, which are kind of we have seen the warehouses across the world. That's becoming a reality in India today, right? So it's a blend of all those things when we say in comparison to what we have currently in India and what we aspire to have in terms of the futuristic warehousing plans. I think these things we must give an attention to.
Great. Pallav, would you have anything to add to that? Because you're also an owner and developer of large-scale facilities like Makaran in Wellspun. So do you have anything to add as an owner?
Yeah, I definitely think that whatever Makaran said, yes, that definitely applies, and that is what most of the developers who are like prime developers in the country are looking at today. Added to it are some more things with respect to flow of operations and sustainability that I would like to mention here, and a bit of automation things. So flow of operations, when I say, it will be about inbound, outbound spaces. Like Arif mentioned, it should not be consumption of maximum FSI. You can just consume all the FSI and have a park which is completely inefficient with respect to logistics for the owners. So today, the infrastructure that exists is the prime reason why cost of logistics in India is as high as 40% of the GDP. Whereas in the other developed countries, it stands today at 9 to 10%. So we are 40% higher. We have a 40% higher cost of logistics in the country, primarily because of warehousing and the supporting transportation. So yes, there should be better planning of the FAR within the park that is developed. You should keep spaces for utilities. You should keep spaces for movement of goods. You should keep proper spaces for road network. You should keep proper spaces for the utilities like power station, like the sewage treatment plants, etc. That is one. Second is inside your premises. So this is outside the premise of the park. Inside of your premises, yes, FM2 floor might be a misnomer, but you should have like super flat floors. This, what it will do is it will support your automation drives in going forward. So if you want to put in, if you want to have completely robot enabled facilities inside, if you want to enable ASRS inside, you need to have super flat floors, which is not what is existing today. The current infrastructure does not support this. So that is one more thing that I would like to add there. Yeah.
Great. So if anybody else has something to add, I'll take that now. Otherwise, we'll move to the next question. All right, so moving on to the next question. Basically, so what we've done is we've kind of encapsulated, and Pallav, you've just touched upon that we need design standards for not just the warehouse, but even the surrounding infrastructure immediately within the vicinity and adjacent to the warehouse, as well as the support structure beyond your park or site, which is at the city level, so that you don't have subsequent problems. So you don't have to have boats reaching your warehouses when you have, a bad spate of monsoon spells. So, looking at that aspect, we feel that there has to be some kind of standardization which has to be brought in, and the industry has to have that, put in place. The part of it, of course, is already what Arif touched upon, was that there are compliance related issues, and those compliance related issues actually has generated demand. But the sad part of it is that the amount of money which has been spent in building that infrastructure is basically all down the tube because it can't be used. So if we have standards which are already based on the compliances and the compliance requirements, automatically quite a bit of the battle is won, quite a bit of the work is done. So that is the most basic level at which we need to start. And moving on from there has got to be operational efficiencies, which of course will be from user and owner operator philosophies of management of the warehouse, the level of technology integration and all that. So, but there has to be still a certain minimum build standard. That is, the base build standardization has to be done so that it's upgradable in the future. Otherwise, again, you'll land up with a huge amount of investment into a facility, which subsequently later on will not meet compliances and then will become so-called substandard. So I'll move to the next question, which is based on the fact that what are the key pain points that people have, when you're trying to develop and build infrastructure in the, be it a generic dry cargo warehouse or a cold chain facility? What are the key pain point areas which you typically face? And, how have you been overcoming them as of right now, currently? Rahul, I think you would be interested in this because you've already been through this whole process and you have come out of it quite spectacularly, if I may say so. You're mute, Rahul. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, apologies. Hi guys. So
Yeah.
I'm still in the process of coming out. It's still midway somewhere. But yeah, so basically, it's all about planning it right. Talking to the customer, understanding what the requirements are. So in our case, we are predominantly in the pharma business, and pharma has been in the limelight of late for so many good and bad reasons. And since this is a temperature controlled sort of facility which we are building, it requires a proper mapping of the primary transportation, the secondary transportation, the customer's requirements, and then going through the entire iteration of designs. And as I've got Pallav here, who's also a partner with us in this project. He would recollect that we've gone through several rounds of design changes, in this whole process of 1 year, and it's been more than a year before we could sort of come to the right design, because customer requirements keep changing even during the design phase. So between pre-COVID and post-COVID also there's a major change in what the customers would want, and now they're talking of a different business continuity plan, in terms of with COVID coming in, and a lot of us being very helpless at very different situations. The BCP model itself goes through a radical change, as to what really do you plan for, because in a situation where everything comes to a standstill, what do you do? Right. I mean, you had the government not being able to sort of do anything. Even the boards would not help you, as you mentioned earlier. So yes, the most important thing is getting the right mix, keeping an upgradable and scalable model where you take care of such risks which we have recently gone through, which is the difficult part. And I think we are still trying to figure it out. That so for example, one of the large clients said that, look, I've got 2 warehouses in the vicinity. And the COVID, during the COVID times, it really helped me, because when one went down, I could operate out of the other. And now that you're bringing me into one warehouse, how does that help? So I honestly did not have an answer at that time, that what kind of business continuity am I going to really do out of that, one sort of consolidated location. And that's something that we are still, it's a work in progress, but I'm sure we'll come out with something. And yeah, we are at the difficult end of the spectrum, when it's not only just cold chain, but it's also pharma cold chain. And I'm sure we'll, as you mentioned, hopefully come out with flying colors eventually.
So the first major pain point is just getting the design program right, as in the design requirements itself. Yeah. And that's typically so because it's a nascent industry, and as the industries keep maturing, and even the back-end production industries keep maturing, obviously the warehousing space will keep changing dimensions. And
see, one more angle of complication that comes in here is that typically you have a box in coming into a pallet, and then the box is being split into a smaller box and going out. So there is a whole sort of cycle that, yeah. So it's a lot more complicated than a typical maybe an FMCG warehousing or an industrial warehousing, where it's a product X in and the same product going out. In this case, you're splitting, combining, you're putting together a lot of different SKUs of medicines which go in eventually to the stockist. So there's a lot of repacking and remanaging activity involved. So when you look at sort of handling of the pallets or handling of the location, you're looking at multiple handlings of the same pallet for different purposes in a very short span of time. Because in healthcare, you see a lot of the push model where 60% of the sales takes place in the last 2 days of the month, 50 to 60%. So you'll have a very slow month, and then suddenly at the end of the month you've got to do a lot of activities which you could have actually spread out through the month. And that's what you've got to plan for.
Okay, that's great. So there are demands which are totally different, and yes. So that's still a program. It's the design program related challenge.
True.
I would like if someone else could jump in. Maybe Rushid, you should jump in, because you are also in the infrastructure space. and you're developing warehousing infrastructure. So what have you faced in addition to what Rahul just shared with us?
I think I would speak as a developer of warehousing and industrial parks. So usually what we face as Arif said, you want to standardize something or you want to design something. It is going to be a blend of, one, of course, as a developer, it has to be the square footage versus the area which you have got. Somewhere it has to make economic sense when you're designing it. Secondly, depending on the areas where you're located, whether it is going to be totally a warehousing segment you're going to address, or you're going to address a warehousing and industrial segment. So most of the designing goes, whether you want to go in for a 12-meter building or you want to go in for a 9-meter building, depending on the, usage, final usage, which is going to come in. Apart from this, as a developer, we face challenges like, you don't know exactly how many customers are going to come in at some point, when you have started off or you have planned. You don't know how you're going to segregate the buildings, post segregation, whether you will be able to fulfill all the fire norms, are the sprinklers adequately put in for the client. Industrial client would require a different sprinkler system, as a warehousing client might require a different sprinkler system. The hazards change. Similarly, on that, the lighting change. So when we try to develop something, most of it has to suit maximum clients would we feel who will come in. And somewhere, probably you can wait and watch in terms of probably doing the sprinkler system or the lighting system at a later stage post you have got a client. So these are some of the challenges we will face when you are designing or building a park, with quite a bit of unknown. Again, on speaking of standardization, I think the key factor, as Arif rightly said, is more than the boxes. There is nothing. There is no. Finally they are just boxes. They are warehouse boxes. There is not much difference in all the boxes. The key feature, what the park comes out is with the amenities, the utilities, the open areas, the docking aprons. Whether they should be 16 meters, they should be 18 meters. Some cases 20 meters, or you want the road width to be 18 meters or 15 meters. So these are the things which require standardization. From developer to developer, people are trying out, changing, trying different combinations to see what suits everyone, or which is good for all the clients to come.
Okay. So basically, where what's come out thus far is that the end user requirements are still a little, unsure and uncertain, and they're not quantified. So you need to first segregate in terms of, or classify warehousing in terms of what sector you are catering to, the kind of goods that they will be, and the flow patterns and movement of goods, whether it's palletized, non-palletized, whether it's being consolidated or broken down. And then therefore, and then whether it's, catering to even cold chain, whether it's catering to meat products, or is it dairy products, or is it pharma, or is it some other, bulk goods storage, dry fruits or fruits or whatever, and vegetables. So there is a whole range of, user requirements, which can be then, I guess it's going to be challenging, because you'll have to segregate those, bring them all separate, and then develop standards individually. It can't be one size fits all kind of a situation. So that's quite clear. I'd like to get Sadashiv's input on this, because Sadashiv is on the design and consultancy side. So there are multiple aspects. Typically, a logistics facility goes through the functional design requirement, which is someone like what Arif really pioneers. And then it goes from functional into technical design or physical design, which is where probably architects and engineers and the rest come in, rest of the consultants come in. So Sadashiv, what are your key issues and pain points that you feel with the kind of projects that you've done so far?
Thanks, Ashish. Ruchi, much has already been said in how warehouse has been an informal and an unorganized sector in the real estate. So even in terms of guidelines and standards, we don't really have any sort of a consolidated or a universal standard or a guideline, even internationally or nationally. Many of the guidelines or standards that we look at today are, a research-based design guidelines, probably from some organizations or from some bodies. There, we have it's things like IWLA, SOL, and transport guidelines, and these things. So there's no real consolidated standards or guidelines that can govern a warehouse or logistic park design. So that's been a big challenge. But having moved forward, I think in the last half a decade or so, with the kind of the customers and clientele and the demand that we are seeing a reform that's kind of evolving. That's kind of happening as we go forward. So, some of the pinch points that were mentioned, that we do not know who the end occupier is, and we do not know how to cater to them. So as designers, we are trying to bridge that gap, because we have the opportunity of working with the end users and sometimes even with developers. So we internally, with respect to RSP, we have come up, with a kind of a standard guideline, or a questionnaire that we start with the clients, or even in terms of checklists that we come up with. So that's kind of a bridge between what the end users are expecting or demanding. And even if you look at the market, we're looking at a 40-60 split. You've got a 40% build to suit requirement and a 60%, developed warehouse, where we're looking at customers to come in and take space. So with this, we're able to pitch in where we have come in. We've got our own standardizing templates, which has built on independent guidelines that we have come across. And much of it is also practical driven, out of practice and out of experience of working with the end users and developers. With that, I think when we start a design process, we predominantly start, even if it's in terms of the layout, because there's a lot of concerns that was mentioned, even in terms of truck movement or circulation. So that's where we predominantly start with what we call is the flow study or the flow analysis in terms of logistic and warehouse, where we start with what's the flow in terms of vehicles, in terms of people, in terms of materials, in terms of goods, how they're coming in, how they're moving out. How do we ensure that there's no crisscross happening? How do we ensure that the one activity happens without interrupting another activity, and the flow is smooth? This also, we've got these templates where we look at it is standardized it caters to the different clientele, or even into the typology of warehouses. Today, the warehouse sector has evolved so much that we don't have one type of warehouse or just a square box or something. So we've got different functions, different warehouses, like you said, cold chain. We've got e-commerce retailers who themselves have category of warehouses.
Yeah.
They don't no longer have one set of warehouses. So in everywhere, the circulation, the distribution, the movement vary. So with an understanding of all of that, we are able to put together a pattern that we work with, which we call as the flow study, flow analysis that we do. Then we take it further into spatial and accessibility studies. So where we look at what needs to go what are the adjacency matrix, what needs to sit next to what, and where is the appropriate location for services, what's the kind of spacing, aisle spacing, rack stacking, etc. So we look at the even in terms of accessibility, we want to be able to reach everything without having to interrupt some other movement or some other activity, and that's the efficiency that today operators are looking at in terms of warehouses. So we do an accessibility and a spatial study that happens there. Then we go into build form analysis, where build form, it starts even in terms of orientation of build form, or even in terms of, what should be the aspect ratios. Today, aspect ratio of build forms are key. This thing, depending on the kind of or typology of warehouses, these aspect ratios vary in terms of length is to breadth. What should be the stacking width? What should be the length? What's the kind of numbers in terms of dockings, docking platforms, or do we look at 3 sides dock, 2 sides dock? So it kind of varies. So we start doing all of those analysis. This comes in from the data that we have picked up, whether it's a build to suit, then we already have guidelines, because today much of the end users have their own standard guidelines that they come to us with. Now we have built our studies from that, and that's why we are using it to help our developer clientele as well. So where we understand the end user and then plug the requirements. And finally, today, a lot of emphasis is being laid on sustainability. So we've got a lot of inputs coming in from sustainability. So we've got about a 6-7 step standardization in sustainability that we've kind of achieved with much of our warehouse designs today. Starting with water efficiency, starting with lighting and electric power efficiencies. So like Anshul did mention, we're looking at warehouses being 24/7 today, and so how the efficiencies in terms of solar rooftops, solar efficiencies. So even in terms of low speed, high velocity fans being used in some of the warehouses today. So we are trying different mechanisms, different systems to bring in efficiency even in terms of sustainability. So the key in terms of design for today, what we're looking at is in terms of efficiency, because like Arif said, it's all about a functional building. So efficiency is the key. And in terms of the flow, in terms of spatial and accessibility studies, and in terms of sustainability, I think those are the drivers. And as we consolidate this, I think this will take us to a guideline. A guideline or a standardization is still far thought, because warehouses it's too vast. I mean, you don't have a single type of warehouse to have a single standard or a single guideline. So, but it's more in terms of a documentation process. Maybe it's driven out of practical experience. That's what I would say.
Okay, so you're actually doing it at your end. You are somehow or the other bringing in your own design standards in the absence of the ones which are already there, and some which are coming from the owners, operators who are your clientele. That's how it's kind of evolved thus far.
Also, you have a lot of these independent bodies, like your safety OSHA, or you have your ASHRAE standards. You've got some of your truck mobility movement standards. So we are able to plug in from them. That's the criticality of the warehouse. You don't really have one document. So what we have been able to do is collate all of this and bring in together the independent guidelines and standards, and also strengthen it with the requirements that are coming in from the end users, and have a document. It's not a single document again. It's more an analysis tool that we have developed. So with the feedback that we get from the client, and having understood the end user or the clientele that we're dealing with, and also whether it's a developer clientele who needs to then go out and rent out the spaces and lease out the spaces, having these understanding, then we custom make the tool, or rather we feed into the tool and then we bring out the guidelines.
So do you work closely with the process consultant also, or do you decide the warehouse footprint, all the aspect ratios, heights, etc.?
So based on the kind of typology of warehouse that we are dealing with, we can suggest the aspect ratios. We have the capabilities to do that. But yes, we do work in more significant typologies where, like what you're talking about, the cold chain, pharma specific cold chain. Now the process is very different there. Now a standardization cannot be expected. So there we work with the process. We try to understand what's being built in, and then come back to the envelope of the building.
Great. So I think we've already kind of touched up on a lot of aspects of the warehouse in terms of design and standardization. And as you've just said, Sadashiv, you are already bringing in sustainability standards into your design process. So what I would like to move to is another question which is open to all panelists, which is that, let's leave the current situation the way it is. We are all responding to that. But whatever are the pain points that we face today in the current situation, they don't carry forward into the future. And therefore, we must be prepared, and we must have an eye on the future. And what is it that we would be doing in terms of what we anticipate happening in the future coming in? And what is it that we are going to be doing today for that, to be able to address issues that will crop up tomorrow, probably a decade down the line?
Okay, can I start with that?
Yes, please, Ara.
So the first thing that I would like to say is that to reduce the ratio, it's important, first of all, to reduce the ratio of build to suit to speculative. If we are able to do that, then so-called customization will go down. And when customization goes down, there is infrastructure which is instantly available for you. A lot of these BTS built to suit specifications are basically standards only. They are built to suit because there is nothing available in the market that suits. Okay, most of them are. So if you're really able to make sure that that processes are understood, and you are able to integrate the processes to the overall infrastructure and the buildings across sectors, and there are quite, I would say, highest common factors available, HCF as we would like to call them, they are available across sectors, which can actually be taken out as a strata and then said that fine, this will take care of almost 75 to 80% of the market that actually need quality storage or quality warehousing or quality distribution. That is one thing, so that we can reduce that. Then the rail BTS remains as a rail. That's one step that we need to look at, which means that sectorial understanding has to improve, and which also means that the point that you just hinted upon, there needs to be a process design or a conceptualizer who's basically responsible for conceptualizing, looking at the supply chain engineering element. I meant to go supply chain engineering, I mean, he's looking at what are the best practices as far as warehouse operations are concerned. Things like, for example, what we do, we look at it from inside outwards. We design buildings after having understood the processes inside and the layouts inside and the impact that. So these are not just boxes, they're intelligent boxes, they're smart boxes, okay? And therefore, column grids, for example, there is a sweet spot of column grids which actually meets VNA, very narrow aisle, wide aisle operations, and multi-tier shelving system operations. So this is where the intra-warehouse layouts come into function, and then you integrate it with the overall park. And however, there will be certain specifics, related to e-commerce because of the volume of vehicles, number of people, etc. But basics, every warehouse has to facilitate safe and volume human movement. Every warehouse has to facilitate smooth facilitation of vehicles, has to focus on material handling. So I think these are the going forward, as your question was, to sum it up, going forward, it's essential that process engineering companies and process analysts who understand the function on the floor are the people who are first on board to understand and to communicate, write up these requirements, make up schematic and concept layouts, which then the engineering companies will be able to convert into engineering requirements. And there you can talk about material and steel safety and steel efficiency and productivity, etc. But they design per se in terms of how many gates, how many columns, where do you enter from, where do you exit from, this height, that, all that is fixed. There is one pure functional requirement. That's what I have to say.
I'll add.
So, hello, am I audible?
Yes, KK.
So I was also looking at certain other elements. I've been kind of hearing the conversations, and I thought, let me also bring in a small perspective from a warehouse manufacturer's eyes. How does the future augur? And of course, the tone that has been set in respect of customer centricity, the need of the customer. I heard two views on grading of warehouses, and I was just thinking, as a manufacturer, what is it that apparently seems to be the direction in which the industry is going? I was also reading through some of the questions that were raised in the chat. So there were questions about sustainable buildings. There are questions about solar rooftop panels, modular solution for external walls, integrated buildings, so many things. So I thought, why not try to present a perspective that addresses some of these issues? So from a perspective of a steel manufacturer, to me, I'm kind of, it's a very unique position. Anshul was reeling out some values, and if one takes a simple percentage of what is the share of revenue of a steel manufacturer over the percentage of the amount that an investor invests in a warehouse, that number is, depending on the industry, it's somewhere between 1 and 10%. It's hardly a number to look at. On the other hand, if you look at the pitfalls that a steel manufacturer can create for the owner, that's probably going to it's going to give palpitations to the owner, because you're already invested, somebody has already started making the building, and there are so many aspects to be worked upon. So typically, looking at this industry, I wanted to start by laying a basic statement that it is not sustainable versus standardized. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So it's not sustainable versus standardized. Somehow the name seems to suggest that they're mutually exclusive. I'm wondering what happens if it can be sustainable while being standardized. What could we do to get the industry to a point where sustainability is not the privilege of a few people? And from that perspective, we were thinking of internally, we've been debating, my colleagues and I, and we said from a steel buildings perspective, the word steel starts with the letter S. So let's try to see how many S's can we create, how many so-called assets can we create. The first S that we said was about safety. Said the future hinges upon all of us devoting our efforts towards safety from concept to commissioning, during, before, after construction, which means the safety has got to be envisaged during design. And I'm pretty sure that all the consultants, all the owners, everybody is extremely happy to have a warehouse whose track record is phenomenal in terms of the way it was built. It's also essential for steel-based building manufacturers to incorporate these elements in design. And what do we mean by that? Safety to be envisaged in terms of accesses, locations, specifying lifelines. Sometimes there are projects where lifelines are not mentioned. I wonder how does the owner go up and maintain these buildings without these lifelines? Am I supposed to be participating in these buildings? Do I politely say that, help me, this is not the way my own guys are, we'll probably put a lifeline and work. We use devices like boom lifts and stuff like that, but what happens to your people thereafter? So this is one of the key directions, the first S. The second was S, of course, comes from, on which a lot has been said and written, sustainability. We have a promise to Mother Earth to redeem her for our children. We cannot do things that are going to be so short in perspective, short term in perspective, that we leave the earth a place which is not worth living. Steel inherently starts off with a great advantage over other product forms here. At the same time, I did read about sustainable buildings. So the provision of solar rooftops, we heard about IGBC ratings, we hear about waterless construction. These extraordinarily enhance the ability of the steel and the warehouse built thereby to be sustainable. The third one, of course, is the pet of all structural engineers. The basic religion of structural engineers is strength. A structural engineer, to the extent that I have seen my colleagues, will err on the side of giving 2 mm more thickness rather than take a chance with it. And that is something we must respect. While at the same time, sustainability along with strength demands that we should not give those 2 mm extra. We do what is necessary. We do what's essential. Fitness for the purpose, safety and stability for the use. I think that is what which should actually comprise strength. And we do get instances where there are specifications of minimum thicknesses. There are certain specifications that enhance the building's general weight. And then there is a pressure ki weight kam kar do, weight kam kar do. So the way of the future is to actually move away from this concept of weight, which somehow makes me feel that we are all people typically selling vegetables rather than selling solutions, which is not the way it is meant to be. A warehouse, I heard from Anshul and from everybody else in this forum, is a mini factory. It works 24/7. It's a solution that's being offered. Where does the concept of rupees per kg come in? Where does the concept of commoditizing it so much that we start looking at a numerator and see whoever is the lowest on the rupees per kg, and the denominator, whoever is lowest on the kg, and then whoever is lowest on the rupees, and then I wonder what's left of that building. And then we try to classify these buildings further as tier 1, tier 2, grade A, grade B. I'm not sure whether this is what the direction in future is meant to be. Which brings me to the biggest, so the solutioning, where you see that one has to talk in terms of solution, again, along the fitness for use, along the purpose for which it's intended. And it could happen. I mean, I am a guy who has a certain type of a car. I'm not having the car of the lowest segment. I have an aspiration and I have a car that meets my aspiration. Can I go and talk to a car seller in terms of the fact that Hey, what's the price for 4 wheels, a steering wheel, a differential, a brake system? Let's try to assemble it. Let's break it down to components. And that's pretty much insulting steel. That's not the way it's envisaged to be. I understand that it's a great check on people running away with the prices, but I think the industry is knowledgeable enough to understand the difference between steel as a commodity and steel buildings as a solution. And here is where integrated building solutions, stuff like inclusion of solar panels, changing of brick walls to maybe aerated concrete, Rapicon walls, which happens to be a brand name from our side, these are there. And a lot of these require we as manufacturers to align with you as specifiers, align with you as end users, owners, leasers. What is it that you want? And how can we develop solutions? Then comes speed. Speed is one of the greatest factors on which the steel industry has been talking. There are proven examples where use of steel has kind of improved on the entire business cycle. One extra year for a school, one extra holiday season for a hotel, palm oil season for the oil refinery. So that's one of the biggest advantages. And in today's uh, extreme speed race amongst the warehousing people, I think steel in terms of speed is an amazing solution. Speed brings with it modularization. I don't have to construct an RCC slab which will house a certain million square feet. I can do it in a modular manner. So when I'm talking of speed, I'm also talking about tempering down that speed. If you want a dozen buildings to be built over, let's say, a period of 16 months, so be it. You want 6 buildings to be done in 3 months, so be it. That is something that nothing other than steel can provide. All this together brings me to a very, very important thing, that is standards. This standards is something we all spoke about: tier 1 suppliers, tier 2 suppliers, grade A warehouses, grade B. In our mind, we have some parameters on which we are basically using them as comparators. And a comparator is only as effective as the eye that sees the two. And if I borrow one of the literary lines, beauty is in the eye of a beholder, and every parent feels his child is the most endowed child on Mother Earth. So I think it's a staring need here to establish standards. And these standards ought to be in alignment with domestic and international. The demand for an IS-based standard which doesn't take into account seismic, or an IS-based standard where we say minus chapter 12, this is not the way an industry is supposed to operate. I think there's a tearing need in the future. If India is going to emerge as a manufacturing center, if it's going to emerge as an e-commerce hub, if all the Amazons and the Walmarts are going to invest in India, how long are we going to be subservient to American standards? There is a need for us to have standards, and that's the 6S I'm talking about. These standards have to be exacting, and there are people who will meet different levels of these standards, and there are customers who will demand different levels of these standards. There is a happy marriage in it for everybody. So that's what is going to help us overcome the bias in grading the product delivered.
Sorry, I think I've lost Krishna Kumar. Is it just me or is it everybody?
No, I think there's some internet issue.
Okay. So I think what Kike was just trying to say is, as a manufacturer, for him, everything just kind of multiplies. There's a whole lot of issues in terms of...
Bias grading has got to go. The best standard is what permits the customer to pick and choose without compromising on the other 5 S's, without compromising on the speed, without compromising on sustainability, strength, solutioning, and speed. And that's the best standard. If that kind of a standard can be written by some of us who are willing to set aside individual motives, I think that's where the future of the industry is. And that's what is going to see us emerge as a superpower that sees 7th S as far as this is concerned. So these were some of my thoughts around what the future is looking like.
Thanks for sharing them, KK. It was very extensive. In fact, the only thing, we lost you for a while over there, so we missed quite a bit of, what you just said. But from the majority of it, if I may just take the liberty to recap, what you've just stated is, yes, you are focusing in terms of multiple aspects of sustainability, speed, operational efficiencies, design standards of which meet safety requirements at the basic level. And this is what you've been trying to do through your manufacturing processes. But what, if I may look at it, prior to that, of course, is a person like Arif, who's looking into the operational and functional requirements being standardized. All those aspects being brought in, functional solutions being brought in, which are standardized. After that, it kind of gets translated to the engineering and the design consultancies, where then architects and engineers and structural designers, they all get together and start bringing in certain standards. Of course, each of those industries do have their substandards. So obviously, all those standards will add up, but they are to meet as a goal the operational and functional standards set by the process engineering. Then comes, after all that is done, then comes the manufacturing process, KK, and you are doing a brilliant job probably at that lane, at that end. What I'm looking at is, what is it, what if, if you typically see US Steel, it's always been forward and backward integration. It's always a back and forth. It's the steel industry itself which has innovated and then brought in a certain aspect to the entire process of standardization, and standards have changed. And overall efficiencies in the sectors can come in. So what do you feel, if it's like, yes, you were talking about cost per kg of the steel consumption. Yes, as an owner, you're going to be looking at the maximum returns on your investment. So you would want to keep your investments as efficient as possible. And sustainability, which we've touched upon on a on a macro level so far, at a micro level, sustainability actually has three aspects. In any thing where a sustainable solution can survive and is viable, it needs to be financially sustainable, culturally and socially sustainable, and then environmentally sustainable. Because if you want to achieve environmental sustainability by putting pressures on the other two, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be a long-term solution. It's going to be a standalone, pat your back, wear a medal, wave a trophy solution. It's never going to work. And sustainability has been my key feature since my college days. When I was doing my sustainable architecture thesis, I was considered mad and extremely elitist. But I knew at that time what we were getting into. So what we have to do is bring in sustainability and weave it into the design standards. It is not a separate goal to be achieved. It has to be. It is an obvious choice. We need to make obvious sustainable choices in every aspect of design, manufacturing, implementation, operation, everything. So that's something which is already done. What I was looking at, and I think we should move forward now, is, in terms of future of warehousing, there is one which is the foreseeable future. The other is the unforeseeable future. If we don't even have standards for our foreseeable future today, we will have the same challenges that we are facing today, even 10 years down the line. And I think that's where Arif made an appeal that everybody needs to park their, individualities and idiosyncrasies aside and come together, because otherwise the industry is not really going to be able to evolve, and time's going to wait for no one. So what will happen is all your BTS solutions will keep coming up, and each time will be a learning curve. Each time there will be some element of, hit and miss, and so on and so forth. And all that is only going to eat into the efficiencies of the operation of the warehouse. It's going to be obviously bringing down and pulling down the standards of the overall logistics infrastructure of this country. So there are two aspects. I think I'm going to take the lead here. I'm sorry for the rant, but I think the future of warehousing has to come from all aspects, from all ends. Manufacturers have to also start looking at how to optimize steel consumption in a PEB building, which has to be safe, it has to be sustainable, it has to be operationally efficient, and it has to have speed of construction too. So what is that solution? Please innovate at your end. The design standards have to be taken up by consultants like Sadashiv and many others, who will be looking at the pain points of owners as well as operators and looking and addressing that at the technical design level. People like Arif and Rahul, who are actually getting into the operational aspects of it and facing challenges of always changing, ever changing needs of operators, who haven't really sat down and looked at it in totality, but just kind of list their pain points. Operation may, this is something which wasn't working, so why don't you address this? I don't want this, I want this addressed. And what is happening is addressing everything in a piecemeal way. You may find a solution for one part, but you lose out on the other, and you don't really know how this is adversely impacting the solution. While it's catering to one problem, how it's adversely impacting other aspects and processes, which till now have been working smoothly. So unless and until it's always rethought in totality, it really doesn't work. And one of my favorite things, which I keep bringing on every forum, is collaborative approach to design and planning. It's always sequential. It is so painful in terms of time, and this handing over of a baton. It comes from the functional and process engineers and process consultants to the technical and design consultants, who then hand it over to the manufacturers and the project management team. And there is so much lost in translation, literally, when every stage it has been handed over. So much is lost because everybody, if they had sat together, there could be efficiencies built into those processes. So I think, I'm talking to and appealing to people like Pallav, KSH Infra, Rushid, who are developing infrastructure at this level to really bring teams together, hire all your consultants, all your people together, and get your operations teams also together. One very nice question which was been asked by one of the attendees is that they want to check how do you do the flow analysis. So I know, Arif, you would have one aspect to it. This was, of course, addressed to Sadashiv. So Sadashiv, I'd like you to answer. Is it through simulation studies, or how do you do the analysis at the physical level of the design of the warehouse? And Arif, subsequently, I would like you to touch upon how do you do the functional design aspects? How do you quantify how much of area and what is adequate or not, if there is a simulation study in your analysis process? Sadashiv, to you.
The simulation, we initially started it as a very manual process. Now we are starting to code into the softwares where we're trying to achieve the simulation. It's a simulation very similar to a traffic management study that we're taking up. We're working on that basis, but it's not a simulation that's kind of complete. I would say at the current moment, it's partially manual and partially simulated. Okay. And we're building in the, the parameters, because it's going to be very dynamic, because like I said, the typology of warehouses is vast. So there are a lot of parameters that are coming in. So I wouldn't say it's completely simulated, but yes, we are getting there.
Great. Arif?
Yeah. So I think excellent question. First of all is that most to what we do, there are two elements to it, and that's most of what everybody does. There should be actually these two elements. Number one is data, input, throughput. This is something which the customer should provide. Unfortunately, customers have no data with them. No data. Data that they have is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. It's a dump. There is no intelligentsia that is built in that data. That's point number one. So data is very important. The second thing that is extremely important is the current performance matrix. What do you want to achieve? So achievement is from a benchmark. So I want to achieve 100 kilometers an hour, but where was I? So what is the as is? Okay. So there is no measurement of as is. Many of them do not have what their as is, and therefore becomes very difficult. It just becomes theoretical and very strategic to say that I want to improve. Where is very important. So performance metrics is there because that is the only way you can actually analyze whether there has been an improvement after the intervention or there is no improvement after the improvement that's happened after the investment or the intervention. So two very important things, data and performance, existing performance metrics. These are two extremely important. How do we do it is that once we've got this, we go down to the field, we go down to the warehouse, which is currently operational, look at the as-is process, study and understand what people are doing, and there on an actual online, on-floor basis, write down our notes of what are the deviations and irregularities that we observe. Okay. There are certain benchmarks in certain industries, best practices, and we work out differentiations between the best practices and the as-is practices. And this is something that comes back to the R&D section or to your design board, to the studio. We come back with all this piece of information to the studio, and then we start recorrecting this on a drawing board, rearrangement on a drawing board. The rearrangement is focused for improving effectiveness in terms of storage capacity, effectiveness in terms of process capacity and productivity of human beings, and improvement in terms of performance. Overall turnaround times, stock to stock time, default. There are so many of these performances that are finally. Otherwise, if there is no performance and there is no economic outturn of this entire thing, then it's all useless. It's all theoretical, And that is where I keep saying. I like the point you made about collaborative design. Collaborative design is definitely the future, and I can see that it is slowly inching. They're slowly inching towards that because now there isn't an issue of competition. It's about we respect what you do, we respect what you do. There is no commonality in terms of infringement. You are an input to me, and I'm an output to so and so person. So there is an intertwined relay that is happening, which actually finally churns out a makhan that you want. I think this is what I personally feel is so very important, and the customer has a very important role to play in this, which is from a data perspective, and also from an as-is performance perspective.
Great. So there, the RF, you have touched upon a topic where someone has also asked that question. What are the design efficiency parameters of warehouses? What are they currently based on? And are there changes required to make them make these designs work adequately?
So this is a project by itself. The question itself is a project, okay? But
I know you already explained that aspect to it.
I will quickly answer the question for the benefit of the gentleman or the lady who's asked this question. The parameters, the current parameters that are important, in terms of design, the key focus parameters is improvement of capacity. You pay rent for the floor. You don't pay rent generally for the height. I know the rental cost of the cost of the building is built in the rent itself, but how do I optimize the utilization of capacity? That's the fundamental process, number one. Number two, how do I smoothen the flow? Because smooth flows help in velocity. Speed is one, the other is velocity. So smoothing of the flows, that is the second very, very important aspect that we use. Third is, how do I ensure that I don't use human beings where they're not supposed to be used? I can alternately use, and that is one of the sustainability issues, I can alternatively use machines. Fine, to do vanilla stuff here to there, we can use machines. That's the second part of it. The third is automation, and the fourth most important part of it is the integration of tech solutions. Because technology, if you see in a warehouse, there is huge amount of technology that is operating at site. You can actually see it. It's not like a banking software where you don't know how your stuff is being kept and how you churn the interest and all that. It happens. Here it's there on the platter. It's on the table. Boom, there. So you can actually see the way stuff is operating. Integrated to several WMSs. There are several WESs connected to WMS.
and WCS, which is the control system sitting above WMS and WMS, all of them at work, in bits and pieces in different sectors of industries. E-commerce may have a variety of, have all of them, but a box in, box out process may have just a little of it. But at the end of the day, the future is going to be tech. So warehouses have to be enabled to hold technology in place. I keep asking people, if you got a 100-meter warehouse by 300 meters and you screwed up on the aspect ratio, tell me two things. How will you make sure productivity is high? How will you even hang your cameras? Let's forget everything. From a 15-meter tall raft, how are you going to hang a camera which needs to be at 10 feet height to be able to see the batch number of what you're sending? So it's good to design these boxes the way we call them as boxes, but actually there is a lot more that needs to evolve. Engineers need to find solutions to, architects need to have the perspective, contractors need to work at those heights, and they don't need to go aghast when they enter into a warehouse which is 15 meters. And we're only talking 15 meters today. You go out and see, they're all 30-meter warehouses, 25, 30-meter warehouses. What happens then? So a lot of skill building, competency, ability to execute, flooring. I mean, there is too many things where I think we need to evolve. So the future is extremely bright, but the road is quite tough at this moment, and that's what it's going to be, an adventure. And the way I have been taught to define adventure is when you're on a trip and you actually encounter the unexpected. Adventure is encountering the unexpected. This business is huge adventure, next 15, 20 years. And I'm sure forest men like all of us here are, will find our own smooth path at the end of the day. We will find that nice river at the end of our trip.
Ruchirji, we are almost towards the end of today's discussion. So can we have one last question where we can take input from all the panelists about their viewpoint about how the industry should evolve in next few years? Maybe quickly, 1 minute for each panel. Yes.
Response. And I think we can take it. We could start from the owners and operators and end with the steel manufacturers, so that KK can have the last word, because I missed a lot of what he said. He broke off. So I would like him to have the last opportunity.
I will just request if we can be very brief on precise to the point. Yes.
In one line, if you can just say, what would be your wish list for the future?
You want me to take a go first?
Oh yes, Rahul.
Oh, thank you. So I think segment specific standardization with a lot of planning on the the flow is the right way to move forward.
Great.
Next.
I would go next. I would say flexible, sustainable design which meets the customer demands.
Great.
The way forward.
I would go in next. I would say more standardization in terms of the outside utilities, in terms of roads and yards. If there's not very clear rules to it, so for the specific industry like us, so that would be nice.
Great. So
I would
infrastructure backing, the support infrastructure.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I would wish to see higher levels of automation. We would like to have both smart warehouses. We would like to see augmented reality, IoT happening both in construction as well as in the operation of warehouses.
Wow, that'll be something, Pallav.
That's really
yeah.
I was also just going to say that technology upgradation, mechanized, automated stacking. I mean, another thing that we're constantly dealing with is, the rising real estate costs. At some point, I think we're going to look at vertical warehousing as well, multi-level warehouses. I think that is something that's very soon going to come into India. So I think that is something that we need to start working with.
Great.
Last but most important, can we have input from?
Thanks for the last word. So, to me, the future looks all hinged on safety, sustainability, integrated solutions, and proper standards. We can't be talking of, I mean, this rupees per kg versus, that's something we got to come over. It served its purpose. It's lived its period. I think we are now, India is now technologically advanced. We are no longer welders and fitters and steel benders. We are solution providers, and that's where it has got to funnel into.
Okay. Avneet, may I just add a bit? I'm so sorry, KK. I think
That's fine.
going to have the last word here. On after me, of course, it'll be Avneet. So no hard feelings there. No, I agree.
So the next time I have a moderator, I'll do it too.
That'll be good.
So Anit, you owe this one to me.
It's been really nice having a very open-hearted chat with all of you. And one thing which I would like to just kind of touch base on is that if we keep this open mind going forward, even down while we work on our projects and we collaborate, that spirit will lead to a lot more benefit to the industry. You might face a few glitches and upheavals in the initial stages of relationship building, but subsequently they'll get sorted out. But what will be left behind is for the industry a legacy of some kind of a collaborative way of working, where some good in terms of standardization comes not from one mind, but from multiple minds who are all great and who have all in-depth knowledge in their own areas and spheres of excellence and influence. So I think that is the thing which we should take forward in terms of any kind of a conference or webinar. My key takeaway has always been how open we leave than when we came in, how open-minded we are when we leave. And that's something which has been really, truly rewarding in this session, Avneet, even though I've been the moderator. So it's been a great experience for me. Over to you, Avneet. Thank you.
Certainly, we had excellent panelists. I must congratulate everybody to putting their heart and mind out and explain us what the industry, the way the industry should go forward. And thank you all for joining us today. I hope we had more time to touch base, because we had such learned professionals. But I think somewhere deep in the heart, I felt we couldn't give adequate time to each one of them to talk more and explain more. And still, I think a lot of interesting points are still left, which we can take up. Which we can definitely take up in the next session sometime. So thank you all. Carol, do we have any announcement? Quick announcement? Can we have?
Okay.
And then we will conclude the session.
Firstly, thank you so much to all the panelists, the moderator, and especially to our keynote address for such a wonderful session. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, SCS TV, for all steel construction updates and access to all our SCS webinars. We are coming up with a very exciting webinar next week on 23rd October at 4:30 p.m., which talks about the green and sustainable design for industrial structures. The speakers for the webinar would be C.N. Srinivasan from C.R. Narayan Rao Consultants, and an expert from ADCPL. Along with that, we'll be having Mr. Mahindra Pingle from Tata BlueScope. We'll be having a webinar on two exciting projects. One is the Indospace Logistics Park, Tamil Nadu, and the other is the Tata Omex project. So do join us next week. The link for the same, both SCS TV and for the next webinar, is in the chat box. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week, and thank you so much to all the speakers and the moderator.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, that was lovely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ruchir. Thanks, everybody else.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Goodbye.